Husker Hangover show. I'm Brandon Shanahan, Husker Hangover on the Cornhusker Connection Network, live from Sun Valley Studios here, aka my dad's garage. A little bit different setup than normal here. We got some family photos over here. We also got a vintage Bo Pelini poster. Things haven't been the same since, of course, but and then obviously some other garage attire here in Omaha, Nebraska. Here for the weekend. Also went to the Nebraska-Michigan game, fortunately and unfortunately. Shout out DJ for getting that set up. What a tough game. I mean, obviously, kind of going into it, you think, well, it's Michigan. They're one of the best teams in the country. And still was, I mean, yesterday was kind of like worst case scenario, I'd say. And if you go through the Cornhusker Connection TikTok page, I went through what has to happen for Nebraska to compete against Michigan. First of all, their defense has to play the best game that they played all year. And specifically, they have to play the best game, the best early. The first quarter has to be the best quarter of the entire season. And they gave up 14 points in back-to-back possessions. Another 14 points in the second quarter. And then once they got that second touchdown, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself even with that. So that was completely opposite of what I had recommended. Was the defense looked very, very exposed. I'll kind of break down the defense here later on because I do think there's a lot of good things, but overall, not a winning formula there. I also brought up special teams. Tristan Alvano's got to be able to kick a field goal. He can't. He didn't. And I watched him. I specifically watched him at halftime for like 10 minutes. He made every single field goal I saw him kick in warm-ups. And I mean, I don't have to tell you guys this. Of course, he's got the leg for it, but I don't know. When there's a team wearing a different color on the other side, it makes things a little bit different. And even if he's not perfect, he needed to be perfect yesterday. But even if he wasn't perfect, at least just the thought of having a field goal kicker is so significant. And I don't know if this factored into like the 4th and 1 early in the game. Nebraska's down 14. They're on like the 30-yard line or so. It's 4th and 1. You call a timeout. Then you decide to go for it after the timeout. I don't know if that had anything to do with the kicker that they had. I don't know. But that's the kind of situation I'm talking about. It's not just, the missing out on the 3 points. It's how you attack the other team's territory once you get there. Because it's a totally different ballgame when you have a kicker that you can lean on and trust. Okay, well, we're at least getting 3 points here. Where, in the other realm, it's like, well, we gotta get a first down here, whether it's 3rd down, whether it's 4th down. Everything's designed around that. So I think that's huge. That obviously didn't pan out yesterday, nor do I think it would have made. I don't think this was the most significant part. Then the offense, I said you cannot turn the football over. You cannot turn the football over. And I specifically mentioned it's not even like I'm talking about winning the turnover battle. I'm not talking about bad mistakes. I'm not talking about turnovers where it's more a takeaway than a turnover. Can't do it. Can't do any of it. It's got to be compete with Michigan. It's got to be so close to perfect, and you can't have any turnovers. I think they throw an interception the second play of the game, and that's kind of when I started to get inklings that this is going to get ugly, because they could do all of that. The defense could have played their best. Tristan Alvano could have been lights out from wherever you put him on the field. And the offense could have played clean, diligent football, making the routine plays, not turning the ball over, moving the ball, keeping Michigan off. And they still could have lost. That's how good Michigan is. But when you take those things away and the defense wasn't very good, the special teams wasn't good, and the offense was turning the ball over again, that's such an ugly formula. And, a formula where it's 45-7, 45-0 before a Joshua Fleek 74-yard dash to break the shutout. And I'm so happy. I like that's might be my favorite touchdown of the season because if we get shut out at home, Nebraska's already had so much as far as like historical streaks taken away. You know, back in Bill Callahan's day, they had a 35-year bull streak taken away. They had all these streaks taken away, and now we're not down to much other than we haven't been shut out at home since the 60s. And now we're getting real specific with these, of course, but to keep that intact, especially after all the trash I talked about Iowa losing, getting shut out by Penn State. Getting shut out's a different deal. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. 45-7 is a very different feeling than 45-0. Now, 45-7 doesn't feel good, but 45-0 feels way worse. So that's upsetting. So I'm very happy that Joshua Fleeks broke off that run. We'll talk about him here later on, but so yeah, everything that I said, like it seemed like Michigan took the page. They had 0 penalties by the time that I left. I'm pretty sure they had 0 penalties total. They were able to run the football at will. They took the routine play. They never got tired of making deposits. Defense was smothering. Overall, just an outstanding game for Michigan. Everything that I told Nebraska they needed to be, Michigan was. So no shocker that turned out pretty poorly for the Huskers. What is that? 45-7. That's what, a 38-point spread. That's double the point spread. That's a bad move. That's bad. But let's kind of start breaking into this because I have some thoughts about how Nebraska played, specifically defense wise. I think you're gonna hear a lot of hyperbole as far as how bad the defense was. The defense gave up a million yards. They couldn't create any negative plays. They couldn't create turnovers. Couldn't get to the quarterback. Getting to the quarterback, that was actually out. That was bad. That was really bad. JJ McCarthy. The only time he got uncomfortable in the pocket was when it seemed like he had so much time he didn't know what to do with it. Which is an interesting tactic. But yeah, that was the only really bad thing to me. You kind of look at it, even that first drive was like a 6-minute drive. Granted, the running backs were getting 6, 7, 8 yards a pop, which isn't great. But and pretty consistently throughout the first half, at least, they didn't give up huge plays. They didn't give up huge chunks. They're giving up 6, 7, 8 yard runs, sure, but they weren't giving up 12, 13, 14, 15 yard runs. You know, there wasn't too many times where McCarthy dropped back to pass and threw to a wide open wide receiver. So there's no like coverage breakdowns that led to big plays. Even like the big plays for Michigan, like that very first touchdown where he mossed him, he was right there. There was 2 guys right there. And now, granted, they didn't make the play, and that's the difference. Is they couldn't make those plays, but overall, I don't think the defense did as bad as you're about to hear that they did over this week and the hyperbole, because there was a lot of high expectations for the defense as far as how they played coming into this game and all of that. But yeah, overall, I didn't think that they played horrible. And then, of course, when you when you grind every single play for like a 7-yard drive on that opener, and then you have to go back out there after a turnover on the second play of the football game. I mean, what do you do? What do you do there? You're probably going to hear some dogs barking. It is what it is. But yeah, the defense, I think they played fine. Obviously not where they needed to be, but and Michigan certainly controlled things from that aspect. But overall, I'm not too discouraged about the defense, and I have a feeling it looks way worse than it is. So I don't know, keep that with a grain of salt. Offensively, I am pretty upset about it. Not in the sense that, well, first of all, I'm upset that, of course, I'm upset that the offensive line couldn't get any push. I've been upset about that all year. I'm upset that it feels like whenever Harburg goes back to pass, the pocket collapses much quicker than it should. Well, I've been upset about that all year. That's no shocker. Um, the running attack is where I'm most upset. First game against Northern Illinois, Henrik Harburg has 19 carries, almost 100 yards. Last week against Louisiana Tech, he had 21 carries, more than almost 150 yards. So he's averaging 20 carries a game, about 100 yards of production, probably more like 110 yards of production average wise. That's great. He ran the ball 9 times yesterday. Now, granted, they didn't run as many plays as they did the last 2 weeks, but it didn't seem like there was any, and I'm sure most of those were scrambles. And I don't know if the score app that I'm looking at chalks up sacks as rushes. I don't think so, but I'm sure all those were scrambles. He he was not involved in the running game. And DJ brought this up yesterday. That feels like a good point, and it's weird because it spanned over different coaches here. It feels like we're very good at getting in quarterbacks who are athletic and who can run the football and have success running the football. But then it feels like we put them into this phone booth in the pocket and expect them to compete from there. And now, granted, because that's how it felt with Taylor Martinez. He had that standout like first quarter of his freshman year where he was just lights out, tore up Kansas State. Like actually like a Heisman contender. Like I talk Heisman Harburg a lot. Taylor Martinez after that Kansas State game was in the Heisman discussions. And then I felt like they did the same thing with Adrian Martinez. Now, granted, injuries kind of hobbled him, and kind of got to a point where there was such a big gap between quarterback one and quarterback two. And that's probably the same case for Taylor Martinez as well, where it's okay, well, we can't have him get hurt. And but here in this situation, the gap between QB1 and QB2, I don't think is that grand. Especially because I think Jeff Sims and I don't know how this works. I don't know how he's feeling. They're comfortable to have him suit up. So he's healthy enough to play. I think if sidebar, I think if he's not 100% capable, then yeah, there's no reason to have him play because what makes him so dangerous and what I think would have given him the best chance to beat Michigan is his legs. If his legs aren't 100%, yeah, throw in Henrik Harburg. But they seem comfortable enough to have him play, and I don't know, this is a big game. This could have been a program changing game. And I mean, I know we're the king of taking moral victories and chalking up close wins like they are wins. But this is one of the best teams in the country. If you can show some light, you can show some good. If you can show something of something, that's that's worth acknowledging. And Henrik Harburg only getting 9 carries. I felt like they strayed away what worked the last couple of weeks. Henrik running the football worked. He's a good runner. He's powerful. He's a good athlete. He's got good instincts. I did see him pitch it on a speed option, which was news. I forgot that you could do that watching him play. But I mean, other than that, he's got good instincts. He knows how to play football, and I think that making him sit in the pocket and try to dice up this crazy good defense of Michigan with this crazy good defensive pass rush thrown into this crazy good secondary is a losing formula. Now, granted, I'm very impressed on the box score. 14 to 25, 199 yards, 8 yards in attempt, no touchdowns. He did have that one interception, which ideally, not great on the second play of the game, but still to this point, I don't think that he's had like a bad turnover like Jeff Sims have. We've now seen more of Henrik Harburg than we have of Jeff Sims, and I've still seen a significantly more bad turnovers from Jeff Sims. Now, granted, it's driving me nuts how many of Harburg's passes are getting batted out. He's 6'5". I I'm guessing what happens is that he throws with this kind of sidearm motion. And at first I thought it was cool. Like, oh, he can throw from different arm angles. And they know it's just this one. It's just this one. And granted, he is 6'5". He played at Kearney, so it's probably done him just fine so far. So it probably hasn't been. But now that we're playing Power 5 college football here, yeah, you're 6'5". Use it. I mean, like when God was making this football player, one of the pros is certainly he's 6'5". He's probably not going to get too many passes batted down to the line of scrimmage. He's not Bryce Young. He's not Kyler Murray. He's not Baker Mayfield, but figure it out. So that's a bummer and dangerous. But I'm really impressed with him. I think going into this game, I talk about the brightest timeline a lot, and as far as what if everything were to go right, if this goes right, this goes right, this goes right, what's the best situation like that? And I talked a lot about how Jeff Sims is the brightest timeline for Nebraska here, especially yesterday. Granted, like I said, if he's healthy, if he's not inhibited at all to run the football, it's Jeff Sims. And the brightest timeline included him playing yesterday, playing that high ceiling. I'm not too sure that that's the case anymore. I mean, of course, to play Michigan, you kind of want that high risk, high reward kind of guy. But looking at the season here, Illinois, Northwestern, Maryland, Michigan State, Iowa, Wisconsin, these are teams that you don't need flashy plays to compete. Like these next 4 games are very winnable. Illinois doesn't look very good. They got blown out by Purdue. Northwestern's at home. Purdue is at home. Michigan State doesn't have a football coach. I mean, we're sitting at 3-4 here, right? No, 2-3. We're sitting at 2-3 here. It's not crazy to say that we have 5 wins before November. And then you just got to pick up one against Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin, or Iowa. None of those games, I think, are skewed so far into the other team's favor. Like, I don't think Nebraska is going to be a double-digit dog the rest of the season. Maryland might be the spot. At Wisconsin might be the spot. Purdue might even push that depending on how the next couple of weeks goes. But overall, there's still a lot of good to be had here. And Henrik Harburg has shown that he's a good quarterback. I haven't seen anything from him that would really worry me. And now you could probably point to, well, he doesn't make explosive plays through the air. I don't know if that's true anymore. He had some really good passes. Granted, a lot of yak stuff yesterday, but that's against one of the best defenses in the country. He's not going to see a defense like that again. And so if he can kind of bring in the big plays with his legs that he made against Northern Illinois and La Tech, and then that kind of diligent passing, depositing yards, giving his talent opportunities to make plays after the catch. If you can combine those, it's not crazy to say that he's the guy going forward, even if Jeff Sims is 100% healthy. And also worth mentioning, and this isn't all of it, this shouldn't be a good chunk of it, but it seems like the fan base has really rallied around Harburg. And of course, growing up in Kearney, that's not nothing. But then you also kind of look at it from, we want him to do well, where I feel like, and this is pretty fucked up in a sense, but it's kind of where we're at as a fan base. If Jeff Sims were to go out there in like a starter's role, I think there'd be a lot of people who are subconsciously rooting for him to not do so great so we can see more of Harburg. So I think going forward, the brightest timeline is Henrik Harburg. And like I said, now 3 games, including against one of the best defenses in the country, he hasn't made any horrible mistakes. Yeah, there's a couple of speed options that I wish he would have pitched it on. There's a couple of bad reads there. There's a couple of, plays where he gets blindsided and fumbles the football, or he has the ball bad at the line of scrimmage and he gets picked off. There's a couple of things like that, but I mean, the atrocious turnovers that Jeff Sims was making when you needed him to make the right play, I think that the reward isn't greater than the risk. And when you look at the schedule, you need to limit your risk more than anything. So I've seen enough from Henrik Harburg. We've seen it against one of the best team that they'll play all season. Things are going to get easier from here for him. So I would anticipate him being the guy, even if Jeff Sims is 100% healthy. So that's that on Nebraska. Overall, not too. Got to take a step back because in the moment, even in the moment, I'm like, this is exactly the opposite of what I was hoping to see. It's year one of a rebuild. There's something to be said about the frustration of the last couple of years, where it's felt like we beat us. We have a punt blocked. We fumble the football in the fourth quarter when we're beating Michigan. We give up a punt return touchdown against Michigan State. You know, all those bad games where it felt like we were the better team and lost. But this one, it's a different feeling. It feels like, well, we're just not good enough. And I don't know if that's a worse place to be, because then you kind of look around and think, okay, well, now we're getting an accurate gauge. It's tough to plan around those kind of nonsense plays that like the 2021 team faced. It's kind of hard to be like, well, I saw these guys compete with Michigan. I saw these guys compete with a 9-win Michigan State team. Saw these guys almost beat Iowa. I mean, but with this, it's like, okay, well, we need to get better, and we need to get better this offseason. Like I said earlier this season, I don't think 3 years is too much time to be asking. I think a bowl game's still very much on the table, and I think that should absolutely be the goal. And 5 wins would be disappointing. Would be disappointing here, but that's all I had for Nebraska. Of course, we'll break this game down with the fellas here later on this week. Got a special guest on the pencil then, so I mean I'm so excited if we can make that work. So some exciting stuff going on here on the Cornhusker Connection Network. The Big 12 had a big week as well, so we'll break that down on Go Big 12 or Go Home later this week. Very interesting week betting wise for Bookie Brook and the boys. So I'm very excited to get to share that with you guys on how that went. So make sure to follow us here on Twitter. One more thing, kind of before we go, we have our better, worse, the same. I go through. Here's my better, worse, same of the week, where I talk about who's better than I thought, who's worse than I thought, and who's the same as I thought. So kind of going through here, West Virginia. Ooh, and this is probably more for any Go Big 12, Go Big Home, or Go Big 12 or Go Home listeners. We talked about West Virginia coming into this year as they could be the worst team in the Big 12. Neil Brown could be on the hot seat. He's very likely on the hot seat. Even make the case that coming into this season, his seat was the hottest, and now they're 4-1. I saw Cyclone Larry, shout out Cyclone Larry. He said that West Virginia is clear and above the 4th best Big 12 team, at least. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, that can't be true. We got Oklahoma and Texas. I'd probably put Kansas State ahead of West Virginia still. Yeah. I mean, who else is there? I mean, I probably would have penciled in TCU there. They beat TCU on the road. None of the new 4 schools are looking that great. UCF blew a huge lead to Baylor, a historically big botchery there. Kansas, maybe. But I don't know how you trust them. They just got blown out. Yeah, West Virginia might be that team. And we saw the same thing with TCU last year, where it's like they're scrappy, they're finding ways to win close games. I don't know. I don't think they have the talent that TCU had last year to really sustain like a Big 12 title push or win a playoff game or even make the playoffs, but they've looked solid. Their defenses looked good. Their offenses looked competent. West Virginia is way better than I thought. Up next, Shooter Sanders. We've talked. Colorado's been on this better than I thought list almost every week, and probably rightly so. But I don't think I've talked specifically about Shooter Sanders. Are we sure that he shouldn't be the number one pick in the draft? Are we really sure of that? Now, I get that you have like the sheer talent of Caleb Williams, but take him out of this equation and take away that people have already penciled him in as the number one overall pick. You have a guy who's prototypical quarterback size. Dude's huge. He's athletic enough. He's not going to beat you with his legs, but he can extend the pocket, extend plays, dash for first down if he needs to. He's almost without question the most poised quarterback I've seen this year. Back and forth battle with TCU, a shootout where TCU didn't go away. Like I don't know if you guys remember that game. They scored on like 3 or 4 straight drives to keep retaking the lead. And every single time Shedeur Sanders went out there and let his guys down there without any real trouble. Like, and going into that Colorado State game, even as somebody who's not dialed in with Colorado, and I'm sure they feel this way in the locker room every time he goes out there in a big spot. I think, oh, if Shedeur Sanders needs to get you a touchdown, he's going to get you a touchdown. Now, there's obviously this generational talent that he played against and lost to yesterday, but man, if I need a touchdown, if my team has the ball on the 15-yard line, a minute left to go with one timeout, how do I not go with Shedeur Sanders? And how is that not like the number one? Maybe that it should be the number one criteria when looking for an NFL quarterback. Is it's the NFL. The talent gaps aren't huge. You're going to be in a lot of close games. The elite quarterbacks win those games. The Mannings, the Bradys, the Mahomeses, they win those games. I'm not sure that there's anybody I'd rather have than Shedeur Sanders in that spot. And there's talent there. Obviously, Travis Hunter hasn't been there, but those last couple of weeks. But Shedeur Sanders, I mean, and now it might not be the same with Caleb Williams because Caleb Williams doesn't have to carry his team like Shedeur Sanders does. So maybe we just haven't seen it a lot. But I think we got to start. For me, Shedeur Sanders has indefinitely eclipsed Drake May as QB2. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for him to possibly overtake QB1, Caleb Williams. And he's fantastic. He won the Heisman Trophy. He's elite. I mean, as a Broncos fan, he's who I hope that they end up with. But also, if they end up with Shedeur Sanders, holy smokes. And also, not, to overlook this, his father is Deion Sanders, if you didn't know. um, so just having that influence of being the same blood as a man who is the most prolific athlete of his time and somebody who even now as a head coach is the center of sports and being able to stay composed and handle the weight that comes with that's not nothing. That's not that's not I don't know if that triumphs generational talent like we keep pegging on to Caleb Williams, but that's huge. And like I said, when I look at Caleb Williams, I see the talent, I see the arm angles, I see the agility, I see the vision, I see all of that. And there probably is a lot more to this than Caleb Williams that I'm giving credit for. But when I see Shedeur Sanders, I see poise. I see confidence. You could argue it's a little bit of arrogance, but I see somebody who is so okay. This is probably a better way to describe it than confidence. Preparation. He's prepared every single play in a way that even when things don't go well, he's prepared for that too. He knows where to go with the football. He knows how to make a play. He knows how to buy some time. He knows how to win, which is insane. That we're not talking about him enough. And maybe we will. It's Sunday. I haven't gotten to dive too big on, because here on the Husker Hangover show, we get to you before everybody else does, outside of Lincoln, Nebraska. Um, so maybe that narrative's changing, but I'm so impressed with Shooter Sanders. And as a Denver Broncos fan, I would be ecstatic to have him on my football team. Oregon State's also better than I thought. Not necessarily because of DJ at quarterback and the upgrade that they made in the transfer portal. Their defense looks good, man. And their offense also looks pretty good. I mean, granted, Utah didn't have Cam Rising. We'll talk about them here shortly. Some foreshadowing there. But Oregon State's good, man. I mean, I had them as probably the number. For me, it was easy to tier up to the Pac-12. You have your 4 teams that are looking to make a college football playoff push. Now, Utah still doesn't have the starting quarterback. I didn't realize that at the time, that we'd be almost halfway through the season and they still wouldn't have Kim Rising. But between USC, Utah, Oregon, and Washington, those 4 teams want to make the college football playoff. They want to compete for a national championship. Then it felt like you had like these other 4 teams here who aren't going to be making a college football playoff push, but could kind of jump in there and win here or there against those first 4 teams, and they might be in Las Vegas for the Pac-12 championship game. Oregon State feels like the best of that team. Washington State certainly doesn't feel too far off from that. So it might just be like an expanded 6-team tier 1, which is crazy to think about, just how deep and good that conference is. I also heard someone brought this up, and obviously this isn't how business deals like this are conducted. But it's like, man, if you would have just waited until like a quarter of the way through the season, the Pac-12 would be creating such a bidding war to stay intact, man. It would be such a bidding war because you get Lincoln Riley, you get Chip Kelly, you get new and upcoming coaches that we don't talk about in Oregon State and Washington State, and those kind of guys. Kalen DeBoer is not a household name yet. There's so much good in Pac-12 football, and it's heartbreaking that they're going to be no more soon. Teams that are worse than I thought, USC. I just gave Colorado all this credit. I just talked about how great Shooter Sanders is. They almost blew that game. They were up 20 late. They almost blew that game. Now, I've always kind of my prediction, and probably my boldest prediction that I feel good about, is that I don't think USC is going to play for the Pac-12 championship. Now, I said that mostly because of their schedule and how it shapes up. And I would always preface that with, I think USC is the best team in the Pac-12, blah, 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 blah. I don't know if USC is the best team in the Pac-12. If so, it's not by like a significant margin that I'd be willing to like plant my flag into, where it's like, oh man, they're so much better than everybody else that they might overcome that schedule. But yeah, they're not as good as I thought. Same thing with Utah, and this kind of goes into more so. I was 100% right about Utah, except Cam Rising. I didn't think it would take this long for him to be back. I heard rumbles about him may or may not be available week 1. That was a month and a half ago, and he's still not available. If he wasn't available last week against UCLA, I would expect that he's not as far along as we may have been led to believe, which I don't think is nothing. So yeah, I mean, going forward, I'm certainly not giving him any. I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt that he's going to show up. Then even so, now you're in the thick of the Pac-12 schedule. You gotta Granted, I think he is like a significantly better quarterback than what they've been able to put out there the last couple of weeks. But I mean, that's not an easy task to go out there and like we've talked about all year. This Pac-12 is good. You're not going to get any real weeks off. Stanford doesn't look great, but even like teams like Arizona State, they showed some pop. Arizona, I don't know if you guys were awake during the Washington Arizona game, but that game ended up being a closer game than anybody had anticipated. Washington only won by a touchdown. Cal, we'll talk about here, is no slouch. There's no easy game to work him into here, unless you can get him in after a bye and let him ease it. Now he's experienced; he might overcome that a little bit better than I'm giving him credit for. But watch out, Utah might not be that good. USA Golf also, by the way, I don't know how the Ryder Cup is shaping up, but after last night, and especially after the first day, they stink, man. First of all, I don't know. Now this is a college football podcast. I don't want to talk too much about golf. I love golf, but who knows? Maybe I'll make another show about that. It's got to be better. Brooks Koepka and Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth on the bench week day one. Granted, it's probably the right call with how bad Scotty and Brooks Koepka were the other day. Thinking that second or third session, they're way worse than I thought. I thought that they would win it, and it would be kind of like it's not really competitive, but the score, they kind of sell it to you to be more competitive than it is in favor of the United States. But no, dude, they stunk. I I don't know between like what's going on now or even what happened overnight, but I'm not giving them any credit. Houston's worse than I thought. I thought that they would look a little bit better. They're not like I didn't expect them to win the Big 12. I didn't expect them to really, compete much in this conference year one, but I did kind of expect them to like push for a bowl game, maybe 5, maybe 6 wins. I don't know if they get there now. They're not very good. You kind of see that talent gap, even though they have been pretty good in the American Conference here the last couple of years. It's not quite the same. It's not quite the same there. So those are the teams that I think or those are the entities that are worse than I had initially thought. But time to go into where I was right, and there's not an insignificant amount that I was right about. Real quick here, California. I it kind of felt weird here. Here's my preseason predictions, and just a quick little timestamp here, August 22nd. The math is wrong. The math doesn't quite add up. I think a fellow had pointed that out. Yeah, just check your math. The math's not right. Don't look at that. But North Texas, I got that right. Auburn, I got that right. Idaho, I got that right. Washington, I got that right. Or Arizona State last night. That wasn't. It's not a crazy game. I'm curious. Let me check the point spread on that real quick, because I wouldn't be surprised if Cal was an underdog in that game. So let's see here. So they beat Arizona State. Close. Okay. Okay. So they were the favorite. Okay. So I can't flex too much on that. But Cal's an experienced team. They lost a lot of close games last year. This is a team that's not an easy. Now, granted, I'm taking a victory lap here because we're barely halfway through the season, including some non-conference slates that may inflate my numbers a little bit. But I've been right about Cal. I don't think they're a bad team. I think there's a lot of folks who did think that they were a bad team that I don't think is particularly accurate here. But yeah, I was right about them. I was also, I talk about this every week, and I'm going to talk about this every week until I'm wrong. Mississippi State, I didn't predict them to win a single SEC game. Again, the math's wrong. They play more than 4 games. I predict them to go 4-8. Put 4-4. I get that. But as you see here, 17 replies, 14 bookmarks. A lot of people thought that this take was wrong, that I was so far off. And now, granted, we're only 5 games in, but I was right about Southern. Louisiana. I was right about Arizona. I was right about LSU. I was right about South Carolina. I was right about Alabama. Um, but still looking at the schedule, and I've said this last week and the week before, there's not a single team on the schedule that I feel very good that Mississippi State is significantly better than. Except Western Michigan, which I have as a win. Southern Mississippi, I have as a win. At Arkansas, Fayetteville's not tough, not an easy place to play. Arkansas is not looking as good as I thought. They probably should have been on this list. They might be on this list next week. But I don't feel confident that this Mississippi State team is going to go into Fayetteville and beat that team, beat KJ Jefferson, beat Rocket Sanders. Could they win that game? Absolutely. That's on the table. Auburn. At Auburn just took it to Georgia and lost by a touchdown. Can Mississippi State win that game? Yes. Yes, they can. Do I think that is crazy for me to say that they don't? No. Kentucky just blew the doors off of Florida. Kentucky's not a bad team. This one's in Starksville. But yeah, I gave the nod to who I think is a hands down better team in Kentucky. Could Mississippi State win this game? Maybe. At Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M is still one of the more improved teams in the country. I think there's no chance that Mississippi State wins this game. Not no chance, but I don't feel bad about this. Southern Mississippi, I gave them 2, and then Ole Miss. Ole Miss looks really good too. So yeah, wrong about 1 or 2 of these games, sure. And am I a little bit bitter because of how mean Mississippi State fans were to me online? Yeah, that's part of it. But I'm right here. I'm not wrong. I'm 5-0 so far. I've got it all down. And also, and I mentioned this before, which is funny to me, whenever like somebody would come at me and talk about how bad of a take this is, I'd ask them straight up, what did I get wrong? Auburn's close on this list. I had somebody in my mentions about Auburn, and I asked them very simply, where did I miss? There's also a learning exercise. I don't know anything. I don't know much about Mississippi State. I did some preparation before this whole project. Absolutely. I dialed into it, studied, looked at who they were bringing back. I even learned a lot after I posted this about Mississippi State and where, if they do prove me wrong, where it's at. But yeah, I've been right so far. I've been right. It's been a learning experience. A lot of teams are not right about Arkansas. I've dropped a couple of games here. And then also my last one, which is kind of a constant here. The SEC's not good defensively. I don't know where we keep. It's crazy to me that we celebrate the SEC in the way that we do without the same level of criticism that we give to the Big 12 for the defense that they play. The Big 12 has good quarterbacks, man. Like, that's why those games are always so high scoring. It's hard to stop good quarterbacks, and the SEC can't even do it. And even last night in the LSU Ole Miss game, I didn't even think that let me pull up the stats here. I don't even think like Jackson Dart's that good of a quarterback to really be put in the tier of quarterbacks who dice up SEC defenses, but he's obviously good enough. It was obviously good enough here. So let's look at this. 637 yards for the losing team. The losing team had 637 yards. They scored 49 points and still didn't win. Daniels had 414 yards and 4 touchdowns. They had a 100-yard rusher. They had a 100-yard receiver. They put up 49 points, 637 yards of offense, and lost because SEC defenses stink. Ole Miss had 700 yards. 65 first downs between the two of them. None of these defenses could get off the field. That's 1,300 yards of offense, man. SEC defense is the SEC defense isn't good. Quit telling me that. Are they still the best conference in the football? Maybe. This year, maybe not. Most years, probably. But it's not because their defenses are cut and above better than everybody else. My going into the season, CJ Stroud tore up Georgia's defense last year. Bryce Young has had success against Georgia's defense. Special quarterbacks take care of business. The SEC just doesn't have a whole lot of them. But anyway, so that's where I thought I was better. That's who I thought was better than I thought. That's who I thought was worse than I initially thought. That's who I, thought was about the same. Like I said, Mississippi State's on there until I'm wrong about one game. And then we'll talk about it. But that's all I had for this Husker Hangover edition here on the Cornhusker Connection Network. We stream live on Twitter every Sunday talking about Nebraska, and then the same better, worse, same shtick there. You can also view it on Mondays on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And then we also have Cornhusker Connection coming up to you this week. Again, a very sneaky, good guest that we're working on locking down. So that's some good stuff coming up. Bookie Brook and the boys, we're actually winning money now. Watch out. It's another good week for the boys. And then also go Big 12 or go home. We're going to have a lot to talk about. West Virginia beat TCU. Outstanding stuff here all around. So make sure to follow, like, subscribe, all that propaganda that I got to tell you to do. Otherwise, the YouTube algorithm won't like me. Lots of good stuff coming up here on the Cornhusker Connection Networks. Daily college football content. 6 to 7 days a week, 7 days a week on TikTok and Instagram. So lots of good stuff going on. If you love college football, you're going to love our stuff. Go Big Red.